JayEmm on Cars is sponsored by Car Vertical. With just a registration number, or even better, a VIN, Car Vertical will search over 20 European databases to find out whether any car you're looking at has a hidden past. They can see if a vehicle was used as a taxi, stolen, suffered fire damage, or involved in a crash, even when it wasn't written off, so could pass other checks. Car Vertical is now an essential tool in my car buying kit, putting all the information I need to know together in one easy-to-read report. Even better, if you follow the link in the description down below, you'll get 10% off. A big thank you to them for being today's sponsor.
Hello everybody, today another entry in my playlist of cool cars for young people, otherwise known as Fiesta ST alternatives. And this is a car that I think is very cool, but certainly quite flawed. Today we are driving an Alfa Romeo MiTO QV, I think, or Quadrifoglio Verde. Honestly, the trim levels are really confusing in these. This is the spicy one. This is the one with the 170 horsepower 1.4, the same as you'd find in the Fiat 124. On the face of it, there is certainly a lot to like, particularly about this precise car. It's in the right colour, very nice shade of red. Not sure exactly what it's called, but it's not Competizione red. Apparently it's one made specifically for sort of a year or two because they were having trouble with some of their other paint. That's very Italian, isn't it? And it's got the right engine in it, I think. It's nice and pokey, and when it wants to be, fairly frugal, can do about 40 to the gallon on the motorway around town, closer to about 20. It's also got these amazing Seatbelt seats in them. I mean, these are really cool looking carbon fiber seats. Carbon fiber seats in a tiny little hatchback. That's not something that you see every day. I'm sort of trying to get used to them. By the end of this review, I'll probably have worked out whether they are or aren't comfy, such is the nature of buckety type seats. However, there are also a lot of reasons you might not want an Alfa Romeo MiTO. First off, many of the other engines are kind of rubbish. They're just woeful. Now, some of them are sort of okay, like the diesels, but some of them are truly terrible. My least favourite being the Twin Air, the two-cylinder one, which hasn't got any power, and I had the misfortune of driving once, and it's got nothing low down, then it gives you a little bit of power, and then it's got nothing again. So you're driving it on boost just to try and keep with traffic. That means it's actually not economical at all. And that's really the sort of worst of both worlds, isn't it? So really, if you are going to buy one of these, just go for one of the spicier engines. Now, this is replacing a car for its owner, Reeve, who's kindly brought it down today. And what it's replacing is another Alfa Romeo MiTO. And he's bought this one because his previous car was so tragically unreliable. Now, if ever there was proof that man is going to grow up to be a fine petrolhead one day, that is it. Buying another Alfa Romeo to replace your unreliable Alfa Romeo. Top work, sir. That car, apparently it's much easier to tell you what didn't go wrong. That was the power steering, which wasn't very good, but didn't break, and the engine. That was the naturally aspirated 16-valve engined car, so didn't have a lot of go in it, but at least it did go. He did also consider an E38 BMW 7 Series or an old Jaguar, and somehow, in a debate between an old 7 Series and a Jag, he managed to find something that wasn't anywhere near as luxurious as those, but was just as unreliable. Fabulous. Now, I remember when these cars came out, and they were not cheap at all. In fact, the only things really at the time that were this sort of size and more expensive were the BMW Mini, still a reasonably new thing then, and when it came out, the Audi A1. So, we're now on one of my favourite driving roads. Let's see what she's got. This car has a 3-way DNA switch for your driving modes, and it's currently in dynamic because that's the mode that gives you the most power. It also gives you a little boost gauge on the screen, and the car is sprightly, if not explosive in its performance, but then maybe I'm expecting too much. It is, after all, 170 horsepower, and it weighs about 1,250 kilos. Alfa Romeo claim it's 1,150 kilos, but of all the manufacturers, Alfa Romeo's scales seem particularly inaccurate. Now, the last car that I drove down this road was an Audi SQ5. So a nice, big, modern, comfortable, sort of mid-size SUV. Unsurprisingly, this is not as comfy as that, but it's not actually doing as bad as I thought it might. Even over what was back there, actually quite a serious bump, the car's doing okay, actually. I've got to say, you know, from the perspective of a young person, they probably want their sort of sporty car to be a little bit firmer. And as we're in town, let's go put this car in its natural mode, which takes much more of a press than you think it should. Immediately, the throttle just sort of goes dead. Literally, all the power just went from this car. I am actually running the AC, which is also costing me a few ponies, but in order to keep my sanity, I am going to leave that on. Brake pedal's just a little bit snatchy, but I think that may be more an observation on the fact that the Audi's was a little bit slow, so I'm not going to count that as a slight against the Alfa. Visibility is pretty good, and indeed this cabin is such a mixed bag, it really is. So you've got this gorgeous big carbon fibre dash, which is a lovely shape. I'm sure it's not real carbon fibre, but yeah, it looks carbony, and that's near enough. But then the rest of it is all this sort of weird scratchy plastic and stuff, and the headline is fine. I don't expect fancy headlines or stuff in a car of this class. These seats, like, you look at the detailing on the seats, you know, look at them and you see this Alfa Romeo logo, which has been split between the two seats. Absolutely fabulous, just piece of artwork. And then you combine that with a build quality that is so dodgy. When Reeve went over a speed bump yesterday, some of the bulbs fell out of the car. No, I'm not joking, seriously, they're up front, just sat there, and in order to get to them, he now needs to prise his headlamps apart with a heat gun. But you get the Alfa Romeo wave. I waved at a man in an Alfa Romeo and he waved back. Oh, that's quite good. There is something a bit special about having an Alfa, and again, this is maybe sort of to Alfa Romeos what the X-Type is to Jaguar, that if you're in a position where you can look down upon this as not a proper Alfa, well, you're a lucky person indeed, I'm sure. Power. Okay, so that was natural, but in dynamic. Yeah, there is a slight difference, I think. Could be placebo, though. It could be me just getting into it at a different part of the rev range. These higher powered versions have got a bigger turbo. It's a Garrett, I think, like you'll find again on the Fiat 124. That means they actually rev fairly cleanly, unlike what you'd have in the Abarth 595s. The entry-level versions of those, they just don't rev nicely. I don't mind this engine. I don't actually hate it. And having a 6-speed gearbox is a big improvement over the 5. That's also something that broke in his last car. I mean, how does a car break a gearbox with only 90 horsepower and no torque? It also rattles a lot, this car, but it's making progress. Even in its, let's just test the suspension in its natural mode as well. Yeah, no, I'm not detecting a difference in the suspension between the two modes. Oh, but your throttle response is markedly different. The minute you press the dynamic mode, suddenly the car shoots forward because it changes the throttle mapping. Oh, it's such a thing to get into out of an SQ5. And the other car I've been driving today is a Lexus Lc Convertible, so £100,000 of Japanese luxury. This is a touch different, but as you might imagine, this is also quite a bit cheaper. In fact, you can pick one of these up for about 5 or 6 grand. And it's a lot of car for not a lot of money. I actually quite like the steering in it. Got a good weighting to it. Brakes work well enough. Not masses of grip in the car, but plenty to have fun. Decent smooth power. Doesn't feel too boosty actually. It's not slow actually. I just looked down. I'm surprised at the speed I'm carrying. Can't really hear much exhaust from in here. That'd be a bit of a disappointment, you know. The youth of today apparently do like pops and bangs. And Reeve is quite a young gentleman. He's only 19, one of the youngest people ever to bring me a car. As a result, and because of where he lives, insurance is not cheap. It's £2 grand a year. That's a lot, isn't it? Is this camera moving? Yeah, the camera's moving around. The camera's getting shaken around. That's when you know. That's how I know a car is really unsettled and bumpy. When the camera starts rotating on its own, especially this little screw thread in there gets undone. Steering in these I actually always quite enjoyed. It's not technically brilliant, it wriggles about quite a bit, not a lot of texture, but it does move with you, it feels alive, gives you a sense of interaction with the thing. I kind of enjoy it. Suits the character of this car, it's kind of scrappy-do nature. Torque steer, mild, I would say. The turbo comes in really quite smoothly and progressively, so doesn't really upset the front end that much. I've driven some other hatchbacks where it's really just like everything at once, and that I think tends to be what causes the problems. This is much better. Apparently post-2010 cars were quite a bit better than some of the earlier ones, but even still these are not the most reliable of things. In fact, most things that can go wrong do go wrong. I saw one of these Arnold Clark rental vans the other day. In fact, I was doing drive-bys. It might have been with a TVR, and the guy was giving it a bit of a bootful with the Trevor, and this Arnold Clark rental van was welded to his rear bumper. It's quite a funny thing to see, really. So, 3-point turn, hill start, torture test. Let's see how she does. In, what's turning cycle like? Historically an Alfa weak point. Not as bad as I thought it might have been. Okay, yeah, no hill start feature. Didn't need the handbrake there, it was okay. Around we go, and yeah, the seats are not superb. I'm not really finding a groove in there. Very, very firmly padded. They do have adjustment for the back, but they're not brilliant. There's actually a surprising amount of room in the back for your passengers, and the boot's not a bad size either. I'd say in this particular class, actually it's quite a good sized car. The same thing with the Giulietta, actually. For its many faults, it was actually a very, very spacious car. So why, as a young person, would you buy one of these? I'm not sure if our Fiesta ST Mark 7's this cheap yet. Because the Mark 6 is a lot cheaper, but then there's also, whoa, crikey, that back end just really tried to step out there, and I wasn't doing anything that fruity with it. That was quite disturbing, and that was under braking, so the rear obviously went really, really light. I was not braking hard, I was not doing anything that silly with it. So yeah, a Mark 6 Fiesta ST is a lot. Oh, there's something weird going on here with this car. Yeah, the Mark 6 Fiesta ST is a lot cheaper, lesser performance and all that jazz, but the Mark 7 is a lot faster car, more modern inside, so on and so forth, but I think also a lot more money. Oh, it's also doing the really, really Italian thing of when I'm braking even remotely hard, it's putting the hazard lights on, which is really annoying. I keep testing those brakes just to see if something was going on. It might have just been there was like a perfect storm there with the crest that's on that corner, but I wasn't pushing this car anywhere near what I'd consider hard enough to really unsettle it, so that took me by surprise. Something to note for younger drivers, maybe not as communicative a chassis as I thought it was. It's fun. It's definitely fun, that's for sure. And it looks good. You can make it sound really decent too. Carbon fibre seats, I mean, that's going to impress your mates. It really is. And they support you. They do hold you in. I'll give them that. Not comfortable, but they are supportive. This gear lever also appears to be slowly sort of twisting its way around, so that obviously needs some adjustment at some point. And the thing will not stop rattling. There's an incessant rattle in here. It's never ending. But it's a laugh. It is a laugh. Unrefined, low rent interior, and when these were new, not cheap. How they ever sold any of them, I do not know, but I think they were very, very popular. Sexy ad campaign, a nice badge, you know, that will shift cars, but I suppose at the time the BMW Mini maybe felt a little bit more upmarket. It was actually even more money. I remember my sister was looking at one of these and it was, you're talking 10 years ago, and it was £15,000, and it wasn't a top spec version at all. That was a lot of cash. It was a heck of a lot of cash for a little car. Somehow they dragged this model on for years and years and years. I don't know how they did it. They've not replaced it yet, and that's a shame because actually I think it deserves a replacement. We should have a small, fun Alfa Romeo in our lives. That should be a thing. The powers that be, though, don't really seem to know what they want to do with Alfa Romeo. They've just canned the Giulia platform entirely, so what are we going to get now? Just a series of just faceless SUVs, like, I don't know, rebadged Fiats? I don't know. That's a shame. That's a real shame for a once great brand. Good news, the stop-start apparently will stay off if you turn it off. That's positive. That's positive indeed. I also need to say a big sorry to the gentleman who actually did bring me a MiTO for review once, and I had some sound problems, so that review never went out, and I felt terribly, terribly bad about that. Sorry. He had a nice Saab too, so I might try and get it back in touch. If you know who I'm talking about, if you are that person, do give me an email. If you have anything you'd like to see on the channel you think would be worth featuring, please do drop me a line. The email details will be in the description of every single video. If you are a young person, should you buy an Alfa Romeo MiTO? Probably not. Would I forgive you if you did? Yeah, I would. I suppose we all have to learn about how you can't really have everything in life at some point in time. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.